Hi there, it's Carl Irwin, the Common Magician, and we've got something interesting to look at today. I've been talking a little bit recently about the trick that cannot be explained and looking into possibly putting together some kind of publication for release on that. But in the meantime, let's talk about some of the concepts, at least that I have going on inside of my head related to this and kind of the common magician take on it. Again, just to catch anybody up that might not be aware, I would assume if you're watching this channel with regularity, you're aware of this particular effect. But the trick that cannot be explained is it's a multiple out effect. It's a surefire hit. It is not a chance effect, but it does rely on chance operations. It is published under the name The Trick That Cannot Be Explained, attributed to Vernon, Diverting. And we're going to look at his write-up, kind of his procedure, at least as much as he published or others have published on his behalf. And then we're going to talk about variations for people like me, okay, that aren't quite as quick-witted, maybe someone like Vernon was or others like him, and how some of these variations really are benign, and I think perfectly adequate, and in some ways may actually improve the experience of the effect and the final recollection of it, which is what we're after. We want people to be done with the effect and recall that it was direct and clean. That's what we're after. Okay, so let's go through this. It starts with the prediction. I've been using the term open prediction. This is not an open prediction in the truest sense. Open prediction is actually a type of effect, and I've been called out for using the term this way before, so I'll just kind of head this off. But an open prediction is one in which the prediction is actually known, and then there is some kind of revelation on it, and it's sitting in the open. This is a type of open prediction, but it suggests that the prediction is locked in and in full view, but it is not known. And in that sense, it is not open. It is sealed up, right? It's out of the awareness, but it is there, and it is not messed around with, right? And particularly for this kind of effect, the open prediction could be held by somebody, making it even more open without being open. So just a quick discussion on that. But the way this is written up, it's only written up to a certain point, and then it's talked about theoretically thereafter. And I have been stating all along that the trick that cannot be explained is, I think, a misnomer. I think it is actually a trick that cannot be described. And I think that's what Vernon was really getting at in his discussions that have been recorded, is that, well, you can't really describe how the trick goes. That's the problem, is that you have all these opportunities that are surefire and will come out absolutely 100% of the time. There's no moment when you do this where you fail. You will always succeed. However, because of those tiered points of revelation, you can't really describe what the trick is and then refer to specifically the method, because the methods are various, right? I think that's what the real meaning is there. It's not so much that the trick is so good that there is no explanation for it that anybody could come up with. I don't think that's what is really meant. Certainly, because it operates on chance operations, it's very difficult to pin down, because there's a reluctance, I think, for someone to just go there and say, well, you got lucky, right? Well, this was lucky. And to Vernon's point, it's not lucky because it's designed such that the revelation will present itself, will be made to present itself. Therefore, you're never actually lucky. Nonetheless, these are chance operations, which means that you're always lucky. You're just lucky soon or you're lucky late. It's one or the other. Or you take chance opportunity, the luck element, and you make it a clean revelation. We're going to talk about that mostly as we get to the end of our discussion here. So here's what it looks like in his kind of explanation. You have your prediction. It's sitting in the open. It could be written down. Could be a card. It could be something. But it's in his presentation. It's there. It is present. It is seen. It is known. Everybody knows that we're coming down to this. Okay. And this is locked in, by the way. It's not like I have an out. This is not a multiple out where I can change this or switch it. This is what it is. The second thing that happens is that the deck is shuffled by the spectator. They shuffle it the way that they want to. Okay. Now, Vernon describes a couple of handsy kinds of things that can happen here. You can do them or not do them, and I've actually had some discussions on the channel before about chance opportunity and chance operations, and just allowing things to happen, and you are discovering what has happened at the same moment that the spectator is. You can do that. The problem with doing that, for example, if the deck is shuffled and you look at the top card, and I don't know what the top card is at this point, but it's turned over and it's looked at, or the deck is turned face up, either one, right? Deck turned face up, turned over, top card is looked at, deck is cut and replaced, turned over and looked at, top card is looked at. These are chance opportunities for revelation, and when the hit happens, you can make that the revelation. The problem in doing it this way, where you are learning at the same rate as the spectator, is that you have to find a way to bury all previous operations up until the moment where one hits. Second, you need to have justification for doing this stuff. You have to say, when someone looks at the top card and you're learning at the moment that they're learning at the same speed, you have to have a justification for bothering to look at the top card and it not being what you're looking for. Okay, so the easiest route that I can think of to do this, and this is not my preferred way, we'll get to my preferred approach here in a minute, which Vernon talks about in his write-up. My preferred way when dealing with this kind of hands-off situation where the spectator's doing everything and you're taking the opportunity to hit it just in luck, is to say, have them turn the card over and say, this is not your card. And with that statement, it can be like a question, but it's rather a statement determining that this is not their card. And they can correct you and say, it is my card, and say, amazing. And that's the end of it. But to point out specifically that the card is not on top. The card is not on top. Go ahead and turn that over. And can you turn the deck over on the bottom, facing up? And if this is hitting, you can say the card is actually on the bottom, right? Or you say, this is not your card. No. You can see it's not on the bottom, which means we don't have control over it, right? That's a justification. Now, you can go down this route. I've talked about using this kind of verbiage before. The problem with doing it is that it is very labor intensive. It's just a lot of stuff you have to have that has to have justification and explanation for it. And it has to feel natural, and that can be hard to do. So this gets back to something in Vernon's write-up where you do get hands-on, you do touch it. The key, I think, is to touch a deck, as we've talked about with any card at any number, right? And this is a very any card at any number kind of. It's one of those big tentpole tricks. And I love these tricks. Some people talk about these kinds of tricks as being not worth the investment of time and consideration. There's so many other better tricks that hit harder and have greater visual. The reason why I think magicians keep coming back to these tricks is not only because of the restrictions they place on them that they're always trying to defeat, but also because they're big tentpole tricks. They kind of cover in an umbrella fashion many other effects, right? You can have all of the methodology that goes into this apply to a very different kind of outcome and a different kind of presentation, such that you could do really a whole act on any card at any number, where you're really just doing the same trick in a number of different presentations. And that could be very engaging. I mean, very engaging, right? You could do this kind of found card from spectator-controlled shuffled deck. You could do many different kinds of methods to this idea and have an act. And it's really the same tentpole trick, right? These ideas, these big ideas, they branch off into other effects. And that's, I think, why they're so good. And the methodology that makes these work has such wide-reaching tentacles that it kind of dips into all other kinds of areas related to card magic, and you can go there and you can create new effects from that. It's great. These are great springboard effects. Okay, enough ranting on that. So Vernon writes up that you can get handsy, and the idea here, I think, that he doesn't specifically talk about, but I know Berglas talks about in his writings on this, is that the idea is to handle the deck in such a way that it's benign. You could not have done anything, right? And my favorite move is the spread call, as you know, and it's because it's one of those moves where it cannot look like you've done anything. I mean, a magician would know about it and understand what can happen there, or even see the telltale signs of it in the tells. But nonetheless, the visual of doing that particular move does not look like you have done anything. There's nothing to be caught on. Just nothing's happened other than fingers have touched the deck. So you want to handle the cards that have been shuffled by the spectator in such a way. I was at the beach a week ago, and we played Texas Hold'em with the family, and the kids are getting older. The nieces and nephews and kids are getting older, and they're learning the game, and they're actually, because there's a couple of teenagers, right, that are really formidable players because they play all the time at home, and they're now joining into the game. So one of the younger kids I noticed was doing this. He'd pick up the cards and he'd go bang, 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 right, and then he would deal. And I finally said, why are you doing that, right? He said, so I'm squaring them up. I said, well, you don't need to do that. And then I saw later on his dad, my brother-in-law, he picked up the cards before he did it, and he went like this. He gave it a tap. Now, we all know that you can square cards like that. But I said, that's where he's getting it from, right? Is that this is a very natural idea, that to square up cards, a stack of papers, right, a ream of stuff, documents, whatever, you pick them up and you do this, and you tap them to square them out. Now, magicians generally don't do that. If I'm going to shuffle cards, table riffle, we square like this, right? We just grab the corners and we do that, and it's squared up, and that's perfectly sufficient. That's a square deck, right? The squaring motion square. This is not necessary, but it is common. It is common. So you take advantage of these commonalities to get ahead, right? So this comes to the other side of it. You can be spontaneous and learn at the rate of the spectator, which has its own problems, but is certainly doable. It allows you to be legitimately hands-off, at least into a point, which we'll talk about. Or you can be ahead. You can be ahead, meaning that I have more information than I should. And that helps me to streamline what is to come. This is a staple in gambling, right? If you're cheating at cards, card cheating, which I don't advise, right? But if you're cheating at cards, one of the best methods of cheating at cards, and the easiest to do, and the trickiest to do, and the safest to do, is merely peeking. Just peeking some identities. If you know the value of the top card at certain points in the game, you have an advantage. You know what identity is out there and given to a person or was going to be put on the table, and that can inform your decision making, right? So just being ahead on some information gets you a long way. So what that looks like, referring back to Vernon's writings on this, is getting a glimpse of the top and bottom. So the cards are taken back and they're set down. Rather than having them do stuff with you folded arms like this, you just give in this touching the deck thing, but you do it in such a way that it is completely benign. You're not going to shuffle. You're not going to cut. You take the cards back, you set them down, you give it a square, and in the squaring motion, I know the top and I know the bottom, right? I just set it down, I can pick up, I can see the top few cards, I can see the bottom card. I might even be able, if I can spread enough, I might even be able to catch a glimpse of the index down here and see the second. I have information. Simple. I don't have to have a lot of information, and I don't need to do this a lot. I just need to get a glimpse of a couple of different places so that I am ahead. I'm ahead on the information. And at this point, now I know what is worth doing and what is not worth doing, right? So the cards come, I square them up, I can see like that, I set them down. Now I can say, go ahead and cut. The shuffle's not good without a cut. You could even use that line, trust the shuffle, but always cut the cards, right? So go ahead and cut, and they cut the cards. And then what you do is you have them complete the cut. And of course, when they do that, it won't be square. So you pick them up and you square them again, and you have more information. And now I know now that this is not a match. It wasn't a match for the first time, and it wasn't a match for the second one. And I have eliminated any of this and any of this. I've just completely beat that, okay? Just by doing this. That's it. That's all I've done. Completely fair, completely benign. I can absolutely claim at this point that I have not, I could say I have not touched the cards, but the way I like to do it is what's the implication of not touching the cards? I mean, what are you really saying by that? When you say I have not touched the cards, what you're saying is I could not have done anything to them. I could not have manage them in any way. So what I say rather than that is I have not controlled the cards. I have not shuffled the cards. I did not cut the cards. You've done everything, right? You can say that. You can just replace touch with what the real meaning is behind that claim. The claim about not touching has to do with the possibilities of touching. I'm not worried about saying I haven't touched the card, but I am worried about making it clear I could not have done the possibilities. And I'm good. I'm as clean, right? So just change the wording a little bit there in your claim. And then conflate later on and say I did not touch the cards, and you're good. You're good to go, and you're reprogramming and you recap. It's no good. It's no good. Now, this is where things start to come apart for Vernon's explanation, because you really have to go to this place next. Now, if we're doing it this way, where we're getting a peek on everything and we're avoiding having to do anything else, we've done a cut, the cut is benign, the cut seems necessary and logical, but we haven't looked at any identities. As far as we know, the spectator has just fairly shuffled and cut the deck, but I have information on this. We now end up at this point, which is actually the start of the presentation, and we're going to do something that's pretty meaningless. You pick up the cards, you spread them out. And this is where I divert from Vernon. Okay, this is where I divert. Vernon's explanation is that when you take a moment to spread the cards so that absolutely every single identity can be seen, this is when you take all the time in the world that you need to do counting, right? You see the identity, you count where it's at. In my case, I'm going for the 3 of hearts. I can see that it's down here from the bottom. Vernon would say you get a count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and then you would have an out for that. You would have a spelling out, a counting out, a number out, whatever's in your vocabulary to get an out for that. And then you can do it cleanly later on. When you do this, though, keep in mind where we're at. I said that the trick starts here. Actually, it doesn't even start here, if we're being clear about this. If I've gotten peaks and I'm ahead on my information, and then we do this spread, I have another justification for this. As I spread, my justification is that you can see that this is very fairly shuffled. There is no particular order to this, and nobody could have known that it would be in this state. It's verification. That's a justification, okay? Now, this follows up now with the next benign movement. By Vernon's account, I know everything I need to know right now to get to that card. I just have to have a vocabulary in Revelation that can't be described at this point because we don't know what it is, right? Or at least at the point prior, we wouldn't know that we would be here. That's my out, and that's the end of the trick, and it's surefire every time. This might involve another cut to get something closer. It might involve a number of different management elements there, right? Nonetheless, what I say is once we've got to this point, we still haven't begun the trick. What I would do is make a choice at this point. Do I do something about this physically or not? Do I get control at this point or not? According to the Vernon methodology, at no point do you get control, but there's actually some open moves that are completely suitable to get better control of the situation. Likewise, not only are there open moves, but there's also discrepant moves, open moves that are discrepancies that I talk about in other projects. You know that I like these things on the channel. We use them a lot. There's discrepancy moves that the spectator can do that can bring out the revelation. And you have to remember that a discrepancy move, a force of some kind that the spectator controls, at least with respect to actually manipulating the cards or choosing a point, choosing a position, that kind of thing is as honest as cutting to a card in the eyes of the spectator. The spectator sees no difference between a discrepant revelation and a real cut. It's the same to them. And I say, bring this vocabulary in, because this kind of vocabulary means that I don't have to spell a thing. I don't have to spell anything. I don't have to count anything. I don't have to justify it. I'm free and clear. Everything can still be on the spectator in revealing in this way. So I choose to get control right now. Why can I get control at this point and remain hands-on? Well, there's an information gap. They see this, but I haven't necessarily said what I'm going to do. They just know that it's there. And that's a good policy with a lot of predictions of this kind, is that it's there, and then you reflect on the fact that it was in the open and it wasn't touched, right? There is an information gap, and information gaps are very, very powerful. The one thing I would do is, as I spread out, rather than get a count, is I would get some separation on the card. That's what I would do. So I can now get some separation on it so that when I pick up the cards to turn them over, I can now control this with an open table shift. Open table shift, not even a hidden one, which I like to do and we've talked about before. So now my choice, rather than to go down Vernon's route, my choice is to pick up the cards, close them up, pinch down on the card above it, push off, and then cut it to the top as I square and pick up. Now I'm in this situation where my force card is actually on the top, and I have a whole bunch of revelations that I can do from here. I could go to the Bill Simon prophecy move. I have this card, after all, sitting here. I could say, could you please hold that card in your hand and go ahead and say stop. They say stop. And I say, go ahead and insert it in that break. Just like that, right? And then I do the move. I spread. I take the card. I say, I want you to see this. And I do the Bill Simon prophecy move. I turn the card over very slowly, I'm showing. And now what I've done is I've now put the card against the force card, which is at the top. Now keep in mind what has happened up to this point. They shuffled the cards. They cut the cards. They verified in the spread. The cards are put back together. The only thing that has happened to these cards, as far as the spectator knows, is that they have shuffled it and they picked this very spot. Now they see the revelation, and then now we have the revelation. Okay, that's just one track, and using a piece of vocabulary out of discrepant moves to do an extremely clean and direct, and surefire, no risk trick that cannot be explained. Right? Now, this could go a lot of other ways. If I get back to this position where I now have my card controlled on top, Other discrepant moves is obviously I could say, great, could you just cut the deck one more time, approximately halfway. They cut, and I say, great, let's complete the cut and hold the break that you made. Now, I go back and forth on this about whether or not that's worth saying. I like saying that because it's true. I'm not justifying anything. I'm not justifying what I'm doing, but I am reinforcing what I want them to know. I'll complete the cut. True. Holding the break that you made. True. It's just not this break. And that's all I say. I don't say anything else. Otherwise, the other philosophy on this is to say nothing. They cut, and then you just do it. And then you go over here for your time misdirection. Say, I've had a card that's been sitting here in the open the entire time, right? I just want to remember, this has been sitting here. You could see it. And I want you to remember that you shuffled the cards. You cut the cards. You verified they were shuffled, right? Nobody could have known the order of any of the cards in the deck. You cut to this position. And I just want to point out that we have the 3 of hearts, and you happen to cut to the 3 of hearts. Crisscross force the thing, right? Other possibilities here. You could get hands-on. You could get hands-on because there's no way that you would have control over the card of interest. You could have them tell you when to stop. You thumb off the top card and they say stop on the shuffle, and then you turn over and you do a false stop force, right? Timing force. And you say, this is where we're at, and then you show the card. Another possibility is to go all Equivocate, and I really love this one. This is, I love Equivocate, but this is an opportunity. Once I have the card on top, this is an ideal opportunity to do a Max Maven style Equivocate, right, where you spread the cards. Now, Vernon talks about this with the face up spread or face down if you know exactly where it's at. If you know where it's at, you can do this kind of thing and use a force where you get them to force a particular area. But we don't need to do that. I know that the card is over here. I say, I'm going to scan my hand over the cards, and I want you to say stop. And by the time I've given my instruction, I'm already almost halfway. And then they say stop, I stop here. And I edge my pinky out to get as many cards as I can. I stop right here, and then I pull these over and I cut them. I cut them out, right? I've just removed most of the deck, and I'm left over here with my force card on top. Then I can do this again. One thing I could do is I could shuffle. I could shuffle this card to the bottom, right? And thumb it down to the bottom and do the same thing again, but maintaining it from the bottom. Or I could go directly if I want to be hands off. I can close this up, and then I can spread this way, and I can go to somebody else, presuming I have other spectators, right? Max Maven, Ricky J, kind of a elimination. And I can say the same thing again. Go ahead and say stop. They say stop. I do this, and now I've reduced it already down to 4, and now I'm into classic Equivocate mode, right? I've got 4 cards. I know that it's the one right here. I can place it right there, and my system is take away 2, give back 1. That's the way I like to do this on the first question. You can do it with 3 or 4. When you go over 4, you probably should have eliminated more to get down to 3 or 4, because once you have 5, 6, it can be a little bit more complicated. One thing you can do is that if they're being really picky about where they're stopping and they're stopping you early, you could make piles as long as you know which pile it's in, piles of 3 or 4. Get rid of a pile using Equivocate and then reveal on that one. If you got 2 piles, you could say, go ahead and pick up a pile and set it over there, right? Or pick up a pile, hand it to me, then you remove the other one, and then you can go from there. That's another way to eliminate, cutting things in half in Equivocate. So we're here. We've eliminated down to these cards. I know this is the one I want. I say, could you please just slide away 2? And I kind of show the motion of what I want them to do. They slide away these 2, right? And then I eliminate these 2, and I say, and slide 1 back. They slide this one back. They're left with that one. They slide this one back. That's the one we're going to use. I eliminate down to that. If they slide away 2 that are not, slide away any 2. They slide away those 2. I'm left with these 2 right here, right? I can pick these up, and I can say, go ahead and pick up 1. They pick up 1 and set it on the deck, right? Or they pick up that one. I say, great, hold on to that. And then we do the revelation. So as long as you're changing geographic movement, changing location, I think my camera just tilted here, changing location as you're doing Equivocate, now I've lined up, changing your location, that keeps the Equivocate very well buried. What you don't want to do in Equivocate, as we've talked about many times, is ask the same question twice. Slide away that one, slide away another, slide, slide, slide. Don't do that, okay? But that is a favored way to do it, because this really does look like nothing's happened, especially if you do it without the shuffling, without muddling things up. I've got my situation here. You can see that the cards are very, very well mixed, right? No one could have known that everything would be in this particular order until right now. And I know it's second from the top, okay, is where the card's at. So now I'm in a position where I can do my thing. And you say, go ahead and say stop. You say stop. You eliminate. You say, very good. Somebody over here, why don't you try? Go ahead and say stop. From this side, right here. Very good. And we've got a few cards here. Why don't you go ahead and pick up a pile, right? They pick up that pile, say great, and you lay these out, and now I'm here. I'm ready to get down to it. So there's a lot of possibilities in Equivocate, and it just seems so clean. And it fits the theme. It fits the theme of decision making. The spectator shuffled, the spectator cut, the spectator's making decisions. This has been sitting in the open the whole time. Trick that cannot be explained without having to do mathematics, without having to have spelling outs, without having to think quickly. With all of these variations, you just don't have to think quickly. And in this way, it actually becomes a trick that can be described, because you really do know what the revelation is going to be every time. The only thing you don't know is that you might be able to do one of the chance operations at the onset. Even if they shuffled the cards and I took them back and I got a glimpse, and let's say we were going for the four of clubs. I get it back, I get my glimpse. It's not necessarily right to just reveal it straight away right now and have them turn over the top card and have it match. That is pretty amazing. There is something, though, I think, to be said in interaction and procedure. It may be worth doing Equivocate right from this point, even if it comes to the top. You may not necessarily want to just do the revelation so directly. It's not like doing that seems any more impossible than them making a whole bunch of decisions in any kind of other discrepant move or Equivocate. Those kinds of approaches, discrepant moves, Equivocate, I think those are very, very accessible ways to deal with the trick that cannot be explained. And that's how I do it. That's how I deal with this kind of effect whenever I'm using just cards and not doing some other kind of last minute switch on the information out here. So anyway, a good long discussion on this. Hopefully you find some of this information interesting. Put your comments in the comments section, some of your feelings maybe on what we're describing here and talking about, or any additional ideas that you might have. Anyway, good luck with that. Happy magicking.